I told you that Josh came when he went to San Francisco to be closer to his chairman. He had no way of supporting himself. He had his 15-speed bike. He interviewed with Google. It was a programming job. He didn't know how to write code. He didn't know anything. He studied Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, interviewed Monday. And in the first 3 or 4 interviews, you have to write code. He passed all of them. Got to the 6th interview, says you got the job. He learned how to code from Thursday to Sunday night at a superior level, world-class level. That's how long it took him. And he said, you're right, Mr. Pena, this is a fucking joke for all you coders in the room. If it took you longer than a weekend, you're retarded. Well, you're retarded anyway, I already know that. You're emotionally retarded, I know that. But if it took you longer than a weekend, something's not right with you. Like racism in Alabama and the South, and there was a lot of myths about black people. Some of those were true, but most of them were false. And I've learned to differentiate over the years. And but where there's smoke, there's fire. Like sex, it all comes at the end. And for those of you and some of you don't know what I mean, so I'm not going to elaborate. We're going to fill in some of the nuances and some of the things that I didn't talk about, like the difference between debt and equity, okay? But I'm going to spend maybe 3 minutes on that, and the difference between long-term debt and short-term debt. I'm going to spend about 10 seconds on that, because remember, this is first blast out of our mouth is seller finance. And then so we have a lot of the kids that I won't say never use commercial debt, but in the beginning almost never use it. Towards the end, the bigger the deal, the closer you get to the commercial debt, the bigger the deal. Because there's some deals you just can't do with seller finance. Although we've had people do $100 million deals with seller finance. I think the biggest is probably $300 million on seller finance, which even I was surprised. And to surprise me is takes some doing. Just as we've had a couple of handfuls of kids, teenagers like Mitchell, come through over the years, and they have less baggage, et cetera, et cetera. They have a tougher time because if they're not a majority, they can't sign papers in the bank. Banks won't take them seriously, and they have to get somebody else to sign. So we're gonna fill in. But wherever it is, no plan survives the first shot, and that's why I've been death on business plans forever. I've never seen a business plan fail on paper. Never. They never fail on paper. They fail, but they sure as hell don't fail on paper. Another thing that about business plans, if the bank. Seller finance, you're not going to need it. The seller's not interested in the business plan. But if you just have to do a business plan, we have been very successful at having the banks write the business plan for us. I don't want to look bad. You don't want to look bad. Why don't you redact the names out of the Carling so we don't know it's them? And I'm not saying that you use business plans. And so you if it should be pie charts, if it should be charts or whatever, and I'll use that. I'll just fill in the industry and the name. And 1 out of 3 times they'll agree. Okay, but if you don't ask, you won't get. There are business plans on the net, like there's everything on the net. Just punch out business plans. I'm not saying they're any good, but I'm not saying that business plan you would put together would be any good either. Some of your directors will be in love with business plans, whether they'll be in love with writing one is a whole other. And I've had, when I was doing it, the CFO, before I formed Great Western, you want a business plan so much, write it. And much to my surprise and chagrin, he wrote it. And it was a first-class deal, and as it turned out, we didn't go forward with that project, and so he wrote it for nothing. And most business plans are written for nothing. They're just because a lot of banks still have a box to check business plan. Now, half the time, our executive summary will suffice. And you're not going to put all the details of a business plan, but you're going to put the major strokes, the major thrusts of the industry. It's going at this, that, and the other thing. But even that, it won't. First, after the first acquisition or before the first acquisition is even completed, won't pass muster and it won't survive the first shot. Now, you heard Andrea say that in one of his deals, he was asked for a business plan, and he said, this was in front of a credit committee actually, and he said, have you ever seen a business plan fail? And the senior banker on the credit committee said, yeah, that's what I keep telling them. Why are we even wasting our time? Because they don't make any sense. Well, down deep inside, most of the bankers know that. The ones that are hot and bothered about business plan are the young bankers, because they're all energetic and they want to get their file. But the truth of the matter is, credit officers, bankers, which, and you're only going to be talking, you should only be talking to credit officers, meaning somebody can make a decision. They want to fill their file up. So when the loan goes shit, they have a bunch of paperwork to cover their butt and the bank's butt. That's the only reason that they're there, that they ask for all this stuff. And more recently, we've just been making jokes about you, and where there's smoke, there's fire, vis-a-vis Indians in that continent. Now they're starting to ask for directors' guarantees. I've been doing this a long, long time. And only in the last couple of years are they asking for directors' guarantees, which I say obviously no to. That means the directors that you've recruited, we want your time, your expertise, not your money, etc. And we don't even mention that somebody might ask them for a guarantee. Another thing that we don't normally get asked or give is lawyers and accountants want the social security number of your directors. That's bullshit. Next, there's no need for them to have that information unless they're going to be on some sort of loan or something, which we're not asking them to. Now, occasionally, a director in a deal, normally the CFO, and there's going to be some equity infusion. Normally, when the numbers don't make sense and there's an equity infusion needed, it's because the seller changes the price. He moves the goalposts and all of a sudden wants $500,000 more or $1 million more or $250,000 more or 200,000 pounds more. And when the CFO says, yeah, I'll put it in, that says two things. Number one, he obviously believes in the deal. It's not so much to support you, but he believes in the deal. And he will get some commensurate amount of equity for that or some sort of interest rate. But 99 times out of 100 or 99% of the time, we're not using directors' money under any circumstance. And then, of course, if the CFO volunteers money, then you should, and it should be in your articles of incorporation that you give first right of refusal to the other directors. Okay, and so and they may or may not put in money, but that's not what the model is. But no model is perfect. Our model is as close to being perfect as there is. But again, the plan you have is a macro plan that you describe, and that's why quite often the executive summary will suffice, because the executive summary is a macro plan. When Thomas says he's going to build a $10 trillion economy, economy, blah, 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 he is very loosey-goosey with how he's going to do it. And quite frankly, the reason why he's so loosey-goosey is because he doesn't know how he's going to do it. He's going to work it out as you go. Last night you saw Mr. Carnegie, my virtual, if that's the right word, mentor, which I had the pleasure, Sally and I, spending my 75th birthday, I believe it was. When you go about 20, 30 miles south of here, it's hard to find things that don't have his name on it, because he's given a lot of money. In New York City, I mean, he donated, tens of millions. He either came over here when he was, went over there when he was 7 or 11 or 12, depending on what story. But the fun story is when he sold to JP Morgan and for $450 million, and JP Morgan told him afterwards, I would have paid a lot more. That should frame, correct. And it's coincidental that when I got thrown out of Great Western, the company was worth about $450 million. Now, the $450 million back then is worth, $300 or $400 billion now, or whatever the number is. Takeaways from Mr. Carnegie and his life. Any comments? Yes, sir.
He spent a lot of time with his first mentor for like maybe 12 years, and he still...
fucked him.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And then we got you. That's the real world. I'm not condoning it, but I sure as hell am highlighting it. What else about it? Yes, sir.
I thought it was interesting that at the beginning he was idealistic like his father, and he was actually pro-labor. I had no idea that at the beginning he was like that.
He had a sick relationship with his mother. A lot of kids, boys, have sick relationships with their mom. He's not the first one, and I'm sure, absolutely positive, he won't be the last one. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir, again.
He had corporate spies on everywhere he had a mill.
Snitches! He wasn't the first guy to use a snitch. Pinkerton. And where do they come from? Scotland. And where do they originate? Glasgow, the Pinkertons. Huh? Pardon? Well, that's where the private eye, he's the one that framed the private detective on his business cards. But they had armies, soldiers. When you needed to tune up the unions or whoever, you'd hire, 50 or 100 Pinkertons. And he had spies. And then when he really wanted some rough stuff done, he brought in the Pinkertons, and it's in the Scottish demeanor. That's typical. But now look at us in Scotland. We've gone from that to this. We've gone from that to the SNP. It's fucking ironic. Thank you. And he used spies. Now, corporate espionage, which there's a lot of it, which is when some big company, General Electric back in the day, steals an idea from Siemens, or Siemens allegedly steals some sort of idea or product or whatever from IBM. But now the corporate espionage is mostly when they hack into your computers and they come away with ideas and or money. And he didn't invent it, but I mean, it's part of corporate life, not so much in the free Western countries, but it certainly is in China and Russia and those kind of countries where they steal your stuff quite readily. And some, having known some hackers in my career, they're quite good at it. There's a whole theory why big companies don't outsource stuff, because they can put a back door in and come back and get your information or take things, as opposed to having your in-house IT, which may or may not be as bright as the guys that you might outsource it to. So there's potential speed bumps in outsourcing. There are, especially in IT. I mean, I laugh when Obama put his healthcare deal together and then the website didn't work and he spent, I don't know, millions. He outsourced it to a Canadian firm of blacks, coincidentally. I'm sure it had nothing to do with it, but then it didn't work. Then they had to go get guys from Belarus and to fix it. I forget how much, it was hundreds of millions, and my IT friends, and I'm chairman of a couple of IT companies, we could have done it for 10 million, and the government spent, remember the government always overpays? Almost $1 billion. When I don't get that involved in the IT projects anymore, but when they tell me we need this, and they cry long enough, I say, okay, what's the budget? $1 million, you've got 200,000. How long is it gonna take? 6 months, you've got 6 weeks, and it always gets done. One of the greatest farces of life is programming and coding. It may be the greatest farce in life. I told you that Josh came when he went to San Francisco to be closer to his chairman. He had no way of supporting himself. He had his 15-speed bike. He interviewed with Google. It was a programming job. He didn't know how to write code. He didn't know anything. He studied Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, interviewed Monday. And in the first 3 or 4 interviews, you have to write code. He passed all of it. Got to the 6th interview, says, you got the job. He learned how to code from Thursday to Sunday night at a superior level, world-class level. That's how long it took him. They said, you're right, Mr. Peña, this is a fucking joke for all you coders in the room. If it took you longer than a weekend, you're retarded. Well, you're retarded anyway, I already know that. You're emotionally retarded, I know that. But if it took you longer than a weekend, something's not right with you. Slow is the operative word. What else about, yes, sir?
He hired the right CEO that wasn't like him.
Now, all this stuff should start to click. I can look in your eyes and it's still not clicking. And there's a reason why the pig fucker did in 26 days, because nothing clicked with him and he still pulled the trigger. You can't do that. You can't help yourself. There used to be a saying back in the 60s and 70s, shoot, aim, fire. Is that right? Shoot? No. Fire, shoot, aim. But anyway, just the opposite. Instead of aim, shoot, fire. And I was the only one that got that. I mean, literally. I had lived my life that way. Anyway, I didn't know I had lived my life that way. And the kids that were part of my flock then, not a gang, we weren't a gang, that I would talk into shit to do. And I was always at the front. If we were gonna fight these guys, I was always at the front. But I didn't give it any thought. Then I told you what Wojak said when we got thrown out of school before graduation. We got rights, Martin Luther King, blah, 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 blah. And they can't throw us out of school. They can't keep us from graduation. He was the intellect of the group. He just passed away, unfortunately. He was the intellect of the group. He's the guy that weighed 16 pounds when he was born, okay? But there was no intellect. He was the extent of the intellect we had in our group of guys. That was it. And whereas, I tell you, you'd still be spreadsheeting some of these things. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir, in the back.
He made employees contests and then set new records, and afterwards set the new records at the new quotas.
Correct. And part of that was not an easy way, because there's no easy way to keep people accountable. That's a myth. There are ways to make accountability easier, but it's not easy because most people come to you in their workplace, not been really held accountable in school, and now you don't have winners. You have participation ribbons. There's no first, second, third place anymore. And we took our kids out of athletics, the Pop Warner and the baseball and that kind of stuff, when they started giving participation. We were right at the cusp of that happening, and so we took the kids out of athletics because I didn't want them to learn how to just participate. I wanted them to learn how to win. Now there's child psychiatrists will tell you, because they didn't participate with other little kids, and it has its downsides, and I would agree that the kids could be considered antisocial. But I think they got that. I don't think they got that from me, not because they didn't participate in the ribbon ceremonies. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir.
He optimized the process and scaled up and looked always to reduce the cost as much as possible.
Well, he's Scottish. Mean here means cheap. But at one time, about 40% of all the inventions in the last 100 years came from Scotland, from radar, you name it. I'm getting from my Westminster speech now. I'd rather rest my case. And there's a whole list of stuff that the Scots did. And he was, by all definitions, 100% Scottish. There's no question about that. It's remarkable. But not just Carnegie and not just Scotland, but the world. Several of you are from countries that had big presence on the planet, went out and discovered stuff. And now look at us. I mean, if John Kennedy hadn't said wrongly, mistakenly, we're going to put a man this decade on the moon, we'd still be spreadsheeting it. And not taking anything away from Mr. Kennedy, who I met. He was an Einstein. And I said that's arguably the greatest quantum leap of all time. That guy stepped off of the moon. Anything else about Mr. Carnegie? He's my virtual mentor, whatever. And for those of you that have read Think and Grow Rich, and he talks about his board, that's a virtual board that he talks about, because Lincoln and all these guys were dead. But you can certainly get enough information about a lot of different people. I patterned myself after many of those guys, Jack Welch being one, who arguably invented the rank and yank methodology, although he was fibbing a little when he said that he tried to be not the smartest guy in the room. He was a PhD from MIT in chemical engineering, if I remember correctly. By definition, you're pretty smart if you do that. And I jokingly say you won't have any problem having people smarter than you in the room. But you want your board, not necessarily IQ smarter, but you certainly want them morally smarter. You want them street smarter than you, because you're going to be leaning on them. You're going to be riding these guys to put together not a written plan, but a plan. And you're going to ride these guys until their legs fall off. And you'll learn over time, and that's why the boards are in transition. You'll learn over time who you can push, what buttons, as Sally would say, you can push. And that only comes with experience, from experience. And again, your chairperson will tell you. But like with Simon yesterday, the male nurse, when his chairman and CFO told him, and he makes it sound like they told me in the morning and I stopped in the afternoon. They told him over several weeks this was a fucking mistake. And then every time he hit the wall, and then finally, sometimes your chairman and CFO or whatever, if you're going to continue down this path, we're leaving. And then you wake up. It shouldn't come to that. In fact, that'll only happen once or twice, and then they will leave. They will leave. But Mr. Carnegie, because he didn't like equity or getting equity and reducing his equity, and his models worked with commercial debt, that's the path he followed. And the things that he did in the interim, like shit-canning his mentor, etc., and doing what he did and running here to the UK when his goons from the Pinkertons were beating people up and killing people, was his pattern. He was running away from the taking of the responsibility of the ugly things. You may choose to do ugly things as CEO, founder, but you got to take responsibility for them.